Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a case that really highlights how a family feud can have absolutely devastating consequences.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about Christine Belford.
Mm-hmm.
And she was murdered along with a friend of hers, Laura Beth Mulford,
Right.
at the Newcastle County Courthouse in Delaware
Yes.
on February 11, 2013. And her murderer was actually her former father-in-law, Thomas Matusiewicz, who died by suicide at the scene. So we're going to be diving into the custody battles, parental abductions, cyber stalking that ultimately led to this.
Yeah, it's a really, really sad case. And, the more you kind of dig into it, the more you see how these little things kind of just built up and built up and ultimately led to, some really, really awful things.
Yeah, so maybe we should just start at the beginning.
Sure.
And kind of lay the groundwork for listeners.
Yeah, definitely.
So Christine Belford and David Matusiewicz got married in 2001. And then between 2002 and 2006, they had 3 daughters together.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
everything seemed to be going okay.
Yeah.
But then things really went downhill.
Yeah.
When David's parents, Thomas and Lenore, moved in with them.
Right.
And things just kind of went south from there. Like there were allegations of abuse.
Oh.
And Christine ended up filing for divorce in 2006.
Right.
And the custody battle over their daughters was pretty brutal, like really awful. And, one of the big things that kind of came out of it was that this psychologist who was appointed by the court to, kind of evaluate the situation,
Yeah.
said that David was unable to, accept that Christine had any positive qualities or that she could actually be a good parent.
Yeah, it sounds like he was really trying to control everything.
Yeah.
And, when someone can't see the good in their former partner, especially when it comes to parenting,
Right.
That's a huge red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's one thing to have a disagreement, about parenting styles or whatever, but to just completely dismiss the other person as being capable of being a good parent is,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
it's definitely a red flag. So then in 2007, things escalated even further.
Okay.
David took the girls on what he said was going to be a vacation to Disney World.
Oh.
And then he just disappeared with them.
Wow.
Yeah. So Christine was obviously frantic. She filed the missing persons report. And it turned out that David had actually planned this whole thing. Like, he had sold his optometry practice. He had withdrawn a bunch of money from his bank accounts.
Yeah.
And they all just vanished.
So he was really trying to disappear
Yeah.
with the girls.
Completely. And the case was assigned to Detective Schreiner,
Okay.
who, really worked tirelessly
Right.
to try to find them. And, he uncovered that the family had actually fled to Texas.
Wow.
And they were living under assumed names.
Oh, wow.
So they were really trying to, just completely
Yeah.
disappear. And it took over a year.
Gosh.
But they were finally found in Nicaragua in 2009.
Wow. A year. That's a long time.
I know. It's a long time to not know where your kids are.
Right. Especially, under those circumstances.
Exactly. So Christine was finally reunited with her daughters.
Yeah.
But turned out that David had, been telling them all kinds of lies about her.
Of course.
Like just trying to poison their minds against her.
Mm-hmm.
And so the girls were really struggling to kind of readjust to being back home with their mother.
Yeah, I imagine that was a lot of trauma.
Yeah, it was really, really difficult. And to make matters even worse, David's parental rights were terminated
Okay.
because of the kidnapping.
Yeah.
And, the Matusiewicz family was just furious.
I bet.
And they basically launched this campaign of defamation and cyberstalking against Christine.
Oh, wow. So they just kind of doubled down.
Yeah. It's really, really unbelievable, like, how far they were willing to go.
Yeah, and it's amazing how sometimes when people, do something wrong, they just can't seem to admit it. And they try to blame everyone else and, just keep digging themselves deeper.
Yeah, exactly, into a hole. So that's kind of the setup for this case.
Yeah.
And we'll get into more of the details of the cyberstalking and what ultimately happened in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah. So we left off with the Matusiewicz family launching this really vicious campaign of defamation and cyberstalking against Christine.
Right, and it's just mind-boggling, how far they were willing to go to try to destroy her reputation.
Yeah, it really is. So they created these websites and videos accusing her of child abuse and neglect.
Wow.
They even contacted her employer with these these totally fabricated allegations.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that, this was all happening online. So it was really difficult for Christine to defend herself against these attacks.
Right, because it's out there for everyone to see.
Exactly. And it's really hard to control the narrative when something like that is happening online.
And I imagine it just made her feel so isolated and alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Like she was constantly being bombarded with these horrible accusations and threats, and it really took a toll on her mental and emotional health.
Yeah, and that's the thing about cyberstalking. It's not just about the words that are being said.
Right.
It's about the impact that it has on the victim. It can really make them feel like they're being watched and followed.
Right.
And it can be really, really terrifying.
Yeah, and in this case, the cyberstalking went even further than just online harassment.
Ah.
They actually started showing up at places where Christine would be,
Oh, wow.
like her work or her kid's school.
So they were really trying to intimidate her.
Yeah, and it was just a constant,
Yeah.
a constant feeling of being unsafe and threatened.
Mm-hmm.
And then things escalated even further in 2010. David was actually released from prison,
Okay.
and he was granted permission to travel to Delaware for a child support hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But what he didn't tell anyone was that his parents were going to be with him.
Oh, gosh.
So the seemingly routine court appearance turned into a tragedy.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So on February 11, 2013, Christine and her friend Laura Beth Mulford, they arrived at the Newcastle County Courthouse for the hearing. And they had no idea that Thomas Matusiewicz was there waiting for them.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and he was armed. And he just opened fire in the courthouse lobby.
Oh, gosh.
She shot Christine multiple times. And then he shot Laura,
Gosh.
who, again, wasn't even involved in any of this.
Right.
And then Thomas turned the gun on himself.
Oh, my gosh. That's just unbelievable.
It's just horrifying. And it's such a tragic example of how far these family feuds can go.
And how something that starts out, as maybe just a disagreement or a difference of opinion,
Right.
can escalate into something so violent and destructive.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that's really important to remember about this case is that, this wasn't just a random act of violence.
Mm-hmm.
This was the culmination of years of harassment and stalking. And, it really highlights the importance of taking cyberstalking seriously.
Yeah, and recognizing the signs early on.
Exactly.
And intervening before it escalates into something like this.
Absolutely. So in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to look at the legal aftermath of this shooting and how this case really changed the way we think about cyberstalking. Welcome back to the deep dive.
So in the last two parts, we really saw how this family feud just kind of spiraled out of control.
It really did.
And ultimately resulted in this horrible, horrible tragedy.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. So in this final part, I thought maybe we could kind of dive into the legal aftermath of the shooting.
Okay.
And how this whole case kind of changed the way that cyber stalking is viewed.
Okay.
Like legally. Yeah, definitely. It was a landmark case in a lot of ways.
Right. So, after the shooting, the authorities, they obviously started investigating right away. And they found all this evidence on the Matusiewicz family's computers and phones.
Like what kind of evidence?
Like emails, videos, online postings, all this stuff.
Wow.
That showed just how much effort they had put into, really trying to destroy Christine's reputation.
So they were really documenting everything.
Yeah, and it was all very deliberate and calculated.
It's chilling.
It really is. So, the authorities, they were able to use this evidence to charge David, Lenore, and Amy Matusiewicz with cyberstalking resulting in death.
Oh, wow. So they were actually able to connect the cyberstalking to the murders.
Yeah, and that was a really big deal.
Yeah.
Because it was the first time that this charge had ever been used in a federal court.
That's huge.
Yeah, it really set a precedent. So, the trial was really emotional. There were a lot of witnesses who testified about, the harassment that Christine had endured.
I bet.
And her friends and family, they talked about how she had lived in fear for years.
It's just so sad.
It really is. And then Christine's oldest daughter actually testified.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and she talked about how her father and grandparents had, really manipulated her and her sisters.
That's just awful.
And they had tried to turn them against their mother.
And I bet that was really hard for her to have to testify against her own family.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
But she was so brave. And I think her testimony really had a powerful impact on the jury.
I can imagine.
So, in the end, all three of the Matusiewicz were found guilty,
Wow.
and they were sentenced to life in prison.
Wow. That's a really strong sentence.
Yeah, and it really shows how seriously the courts are now taking cyberstalking.
Yeah, because for a long time it was kind of seen as, not a real crime or something that wasn't that serious.
Right.
But this case really changed that.
Absolutely. And I think it also really highlights the importance of speaking out, if you're being harassed or stalked online.
Yeah, definitely. Don't suffer in silence.
Right. There are resources available to help you. And it's important to report it to the authorities.
And I think it's also important to remember that words can have a real impact.
Yes.
Even if they're just words online, they can still cause a lot of damage.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think, the Belford case is just a really tragic reminder of how important it is to take cyberstalking seriously. And, it's a reminder that we all need to be more aware of the dangers of online harassment and,
Yeah.
just to be kind to each other online.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in true crime, I highly recommend checking out the Deadly Files show. They actually did an episode on this specific case, and it was really, really well done. So thank you for listening to this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really eye-opening.
Absolutely. And we'll see you next time.